Hey there again, physics peeps. We're going to be doing some conversions or dimensional analysis again, but this time we're going to be working with units that have fractions within them. So something that's kind of like what's in these examples. Like this isn't just miles or kilometers. This one says miles per hour. It's a fraction. And this one's feet per second, meters per second, miles per minute. Those are we deal with a little bit differently when we do dimensional analysis. But a lot of the same rules that applied before, like these four start with what we're given. We do units and then numbers. We use one prefix at a time and multiply across, then divide. So we'll deal with those as we go through this. Also using our reference sheet, we'll come back to using these prefixes, but there's going to be other times when we use other conversion factors, especially with things that are not necessarily related to the metric system. Like in here, you'll see some things that are metric, like meters or kilometers, but we relate them to things that are not metric system, like 1 meter is 3.28 feet, and 1 inch is 2.54 centimeters, 1 mile is 1.61 kilometers, and 1 mile 5,280 feet. Um, so sometimes they can be mixed with things that are not metric, and we can still use conversion factors, but we have to have those pretty defined. Some of them you already know, things like there's 60 seconds in 1 minute, or that there's 12 inches in 1 foot. Those will be some things that we expect that you know or have already known, and those you'll see pop up here too. Okay? But let's get to converting this one, this 0.32 miles per hour to feet per second. We're going to start with this. We always start with what we're given, and what we're given is this number, 0.32 miles per hour. So we start by writing that out, 0.32. And this unit, though, when I write it, the miles, I'm going to have it there. But this hours does not go in the same line as before. Remember, we're really setting up fractions when we do this. So before we always kind of like put this, it's on the top of the line. But when we write fractions, we can write fractions in this way, or we can write fractions in this way. But when we write fractions for this stuff, we want to do it this way because we're dealing with stuff on top and bottom. So when we see miles per hour, miles is like it's on top, but hours is really on the bottom. There's no number that you have to put on the bottom. Remember, it's kind of like putting a 1 on the bottom. You can do that. Okay? But this is what we start with. Then we're going to convert that. We're going to do a multiply sign in a line. And there's going to be numbers and units that go in here. Units go first, then numbers. The units that go in here, I only want to deal with one of these units at a time. I have miles and hours. And I'm going to only deal with miles to begin with. I'll have to come back and deal with hours later. I can't do both at the same time. And so what I mean by that is kind of like before, whatever started up here on top, that's going to go down here on the bottom. Yep. So I have miles, that goes on the bottom. Hours doesn't go over here yet. We'll get to it. Instead, I want to convert miles to something that's related to over here. So miles is on top. I want to convert it to feet. That's on top. Okay? Well, I could do that if I know how many feet there are in a mile. And if you don't have that memorized, it's on your reference sheet. There's actually 5,280 feet in 1 mile. I could do that. So now that I have the units in, I could put the numbers in. But if I'm getting them from this reference sheet, I have to put them in just as they appear. And so I'm fine with it. Okay. So it's 5,280 feet in 1 mile. I have numbers and units in both spots. And when I look, I got miles on top, miles on bottom. Those two will cancel out. Feet doesn't cancel out with anything. I actually just leave it there. It's one of the units that I want, so I'm going to circle it just as a cue to myself that I'm done with the process for that unit. And I converted miles to feet. But because this was a fraction that contained 2 units, I also have to convert hours into seconds. So I'm not done. I still have to deal with the hours. So I have to do another one. But feet is no longer going to play a role into these. Feet doesn't come down. I stop with it. Instead, I go back to the beginning. I start dealing with the hours. I want to convert it to seconds. So to do that, I'm going to put numbers and units in here. Units go first. Okay? So hours, it doesn't actually go on the bottom here because it's already on the bottom. It has to cancel out or has to cross over. So instead, hours, it belongs up on top. The unit that I want to put it into goes on the bottom. I could put seconds if I know how many seconds there are in an hour, but I could also break it up into smaller steps. Like I can kind of work my way towards seconds. So like hours, instead of right to seconds, I could go hours to minutes, and minutes would go on the bottom. I have units in both spots. Now I can put numbers. 1 hour is 60 minutes. The hours will actually cancel out because I have 1 hour on the bottom and an hour on top. I'm left with minutes, but that's not the unit I want. So I have to do another conversion factor. This time, I'm going to be putting minutes in over here. But minutes, it starts on the bottom. It's going to go up here on top. And then it's seconds that will go on the bottom because that's what I'm trying to get to. I have units in both spots. Now I can put numbers. 1 minute is 60 seconds. The minutes cross out because they're on opposite sides. Seconds doesn't cancel out with anything, but it is the unit that I want. So I'm going to circle it. I have both units that I wanted in the end. So now I'm done with the process. And notice as we did this, this rule didn't necessarily apply because we didn't deal with metric prefixes. That's okay. But now I can do the math. I multiply across, then I divide. Just like on the other problems that we did. Take the numbers along the top. And I'm going to multiply those together. So this one, I need to use my calculator for. So I can take that 0.32 times 500 or 5,280 times 1 times 1. And if I do that, I get 1,689.6. I have to multiply across the bottom as well. So I take 1 times 1 times 60 times 60. If I do that, I get 3,600. You can do that on your calculator and that's fine too. Okay? But now that I multiply the cross on both of them, now I divide. So I take those two numbers, divide them, I get 0.4, we'll say 69, that's okay. 0.469, and it has a bunch of 3's that are repeating. You can go out 2 or 3 decimals. 2 or 3 decimals is fine. But here's our answer. It's 0.469. But the unit is whatever I wanted to go for. It's whatever did not cancel out over here. It's feet per second. So it's the same principles as before. The only part is that gets tricky is when you have to deal with this other unit on the bottom. Don't deal with it right away. Deal with this one on top first, get it to whatever unit that you want it to get to, and then you have to go back and deal with this unit that you started with on the bottom. And you have to convert it to this other one that's on the bottom. And we're going to do that in this next example, convert 100 meters per second to miles per minute, and we'll go through that same process. So we always start with what we're given. We have 100 meters, but the way that it's written, we don't want to write it out this way, meters per second, because it looks like both of them are on top. And that's not true. Seconds is actually on the bottom. So we want to write seconds down here. Remember, there's no number that you have to write down here, but it's like having a 1. So 100 meters per second. So it. Okay? Then we do a multiply sign and a line. I'm going to put numbers and units in there, but units come first. So I started with meters on the top. Meters is going to go on the bottom. Seconds, I'm going to wait on because I started working with the meters. I want to convert meters to something that's related to miles. But if I put miles up on top, I could do that if I know the relationship between meters and miles. I don't know it off the top of my head. And when I look at my reference sheet, well, meters and miles, there's miles and kilometers. There's meters and feet. There's a couple ways you could actually do this. Instead of dealing with just one conversion factor, I could try to connect two things together. I'm in meters, and if I can convert it to feet, then I could actually convert it feet to miles. And that's what I'm going to have to do. Okay? Again, there's other ways that you could do this, and that's okay. But instead of going meters to miles directly, I'm going to go meters to feet. And from my conversion factor, it said 1 meter is 3.28 feet. I got that straight from the reference sheet. And I have numbers and units in here now. The meters, they can cross out. Feet doesn't cross out, and it's not the unit that I want. So I have to do another conversion factor. Units first, then numbers. So the unit, feet, was up on top. Feet is going to come down to the bottom. And then the unit that goes on top is miles. Now I can do that because I know a relationship with miles and feet. And 1 mile, is it going to let me? Yep, there we go. It's 5,280 feet. The feet will cross out because one's on top, one's on bottom. Miles is a unit that I want in my answer. So I'm going to circle it, kind of tell my brain that I'm done with that unit. But I do have to go back and deal with this other unit that was started on the bottom. So I have to do a multiply sign and a line. Seconds started on the bottom. So when I put it over here, I do units first, seconds is going to go up on top. The unit that goes on the bottom, it's not miles. We're done with that one. The unit on the bottom is what I'm trying to convert it to, trying to convert it to minutes. And I could do that in one step because there are 60 seconds in 1 minute, and I know that. That's great. The seconds cross out because they're on opposite sides. Minutes is the unit that I wanted, so I'm going to circle that. I have both units that I want in from my answer, and so I'm done with this process. Now I just do the math. So I take all the numbers on top, I multiply them. I take 100 times 3.28 times 60. I get 19,680 divided by the numbers along the bottom. I have 1 times 5,280 times 1. That's nice. And now I can divide these two numbers. And I end up with 3.73 if you end up rounding it. Because on my calculator, it shows up with a bunch of other numbers. Again, 2 or 3 decimals, that's fine. But the unit, it's whatever did not cancel out. It's what I wanted in my answer. So it's miles per minute. And that's it. Okay? So that's doing conversion or dimensional analysis with fractions.